Hey everybody, this is Brian and Leslie Fatherees coming to you with the Unbreakable podcast. Welcome to August, the dog days of summer. Gotta love it, right? I always like August for several reasons. One, I played football for a gazillion years, and so August was always the time that I went back to practice, even though practice was painful. Went back to practice, got ready for football season, got a football guy. So like football is upon us. And yes, here we go. 'Cause I know all over the country right now, there are people reporting to campuses, high schools, all over the place, JFLs, and they are practicing their skill set for this upcoming season. So I like August for that. Number two, it's my birthday month. It's my birthday. Woo woo. Not today, but soon.
Soon. Yes,
You know, a week and a day after this podcast will be my next birthday, and I'm entering into a new decade. I'll be 30 years old. It's going to be exciting. I'm very ready for 30. Times
30 twice.
Times two. So, and August also represented school, and I enjoyed school. All through school, I was social. So I enjoyed the interaction all the way through college. I really liked school. And so those were the three things that made me excited about August.
Right.
Didn't like the heat, didn't like the humidity, but other than that, we're cool. But that brings us to our topic today. We want to talk to you about one of those three. It's not my birthday. Sorry. I know you really want to do that. It's not football. And for about probably 20% of you, you're like, dang it, I really want to talk about football. We can do that some other time. Just be fun. But thirdly, schooling. So we want to talk about schooling, and we specifically want to talk about why we chose homeschooling over private schooling, over public schooling, over any other kind of type of schooling you can think of. We chose homeschooling in our household. We don't find that controversial. I think some people do, but we don't. It's just something that we chose. We'll explain why as we move forward in this topic, but we're dedicating the whole month of August to homeschooling. Why we chose it, why you should, some benefits, and the pluses and cons, pros and cons of homeschooling. We're going to get into some of that later in the month, but for today, we're simply just going to talk to you about our story and why we homeschooled, and we may even hit a little bit of the results of our homeschooling, a little bit about how that worked for us and our children. So with that said, I'm just going to defer. Well, actually, I'm not. I'm going to go to Leslie in a second. I need to lay a foundation, a background.
Lay a foundation.
Lay it. Go, buddy. Go.
Go, baby.
Thank you. Thanks. Leslie and I are pretty serious people. We have a lot of fun, but we're serious people. So when we got married 33 plus years ago on our honeymoon, one of the things that we did, no, not that, but we did do that, but not that. One of the things that we did, for those of you on the podcast that can't see, she's patting me on my shoulder and shaking her head at me. One of the things that we did was prayed over our potential future family.
Yes.
And things we wanted for our family, right? And so we prayed about names. We prayed about education. We prayed about discipline. We prayed about multiple areas of raising children and having a family. We didn't know that we would be having a family by the end of that year, but we got married in January and maybe by December. But still, we prayed about all of that on our honeymoon and took it very seriously. So actually, on our honeymoon is where we made the decision to homeschool before we even had children. So I want to tell you that you as parents, you laid the foundation. You set the tone. You make the choices, and it has nothing to do with what your children want. It has to do with what God tells you to do and how He tells you to do it. Right. So with that, now I'm throwing it to my wife because she's going to talk a lot because she loves homeschooling, and she spent 26 years educating our children. And then after that, she's like, what are we going to do? I said, well, I guess now we can teach them all out loud. It would be great. And teach other people how to do it. So anyway, my beautiful wife, Leslie, and she's going to talk to you about why we, as a couple and as a family, chose homeschooling.
Yes. So obviously, I think obviously, but our biggest thing with homeschooling comes from, we feel like the Lord led us into that decision.
Yep, absolutely.
When we read in Deuteronomy 6 about how we're supposed to share with our children,
Yep.
It convicted our hearts. So I'm going to read it to you and allow you to hear what it is that we based our decision off of. This is verses 5 through 9. It says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your mind and heart and with your entire being and with all of your might.
Yeah.
And these words which I'm commanding you this day shall be first in your own minds and hearts, and then you shall whet and sharpen them so as to make them penetrate and teach and impress them diligently upon the minds and hearts of your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them as a sign upon your hand, and they shall be frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them upon the doorposts of your house and on your gates." Okay, so when we read that scripture, Brian and I both just had the conviction that there's no way we can do all of that if we never see our kids
Right.
all day long. Our children are not at home. If we don't have access to them, if we we can't rise up with them and walk by the way with them and do all that if they're not around us. And so schooling, in the public schooling sense, they want to have your children at least 8 hours a day. And it could be less or a little more depending on where you are and where you school and all that. But in public school system, they are taking your children and indoctrinating them. We've talked about that recently, but they're instilling in them their ideas
Yep.
of how your children should behave, how they should act toward others, how they should believe, how they should, just anything. But they've got 8 hours to instill all of those things into them. And the teacher may be someone that you agree with, or it may be someone you don't agree with.
Right.
And so the idea of who should train my child came down to, I don't want anybody to train my child except me, Brian and I, because I'm the one who's going to know
Right.
what the Lord is saying to my family and how he wants my family to grow, what he needs my children to learn. We have that access to the Lord and then to our children. And it was very important to us that we could raise our children the way we felt God was telling us to raise our children.
Yeah.
When we began homeschooling, it was like 1995, right around in that era. And in that time frame,
it wasn't as popular.
Wasn't very popular. It wasn't as popular as it is now. Back then, there was about 700,000 people who were homeschooling, families who were homeschooling. That sounds like a big number, but the United States is huge. It's really not, and that's just in the United States.
Yeah, there's 331 million in the United States.
Yeah, and so it really was a very small percentage of people who were doing it. If you compare it to today, the numbers in 2022 said 3.7 million. So it's enlarged greatly.
Which is still basically only 1% of the population.
Yeah, it's still not a huge percentage overall. But homeschooling is a great option for educating your children for a lot of reasons. And I don't know if I want to go into those first or...
No, just go down the list.
Okay,
We have a list. We have a list,
of course.
because of my wife. I don't do lists. She just loves lists. She's great with them.
Anyway, some of the contributing factors to why we decided to homeschool, besides the fact God first, God His way first was what was really important to us. We certainly
felt like God spoke to us as a couple about our children and their education before we even had a child,
right.
And felt like that was a mandate to us in the spirit.
Yes.
To do that. Did we have any clue what that meant? Not one. We had to start doing homework and research.
We did. I had a little bit of a clue because I had some exposure to some friends who did homeschool. Not very many, just like a couple examples. And I really liked what I saw because the camaraderie between the children and the parents was good, because there were hands-on ways of teaching your children that you won't necessarily get in a public school system because there's too many children. And when there's a one parent or two parents training and teaching, there's more one-on-one. And so I really love that. And that exposure to just a couple friends who had already done it really influenced my thinking about it and made me really want to follow after that example.
Absolutely.
Also, when we ourselves went to public school, which we did, both of us went to public school all through our schooling. All through
high school and college.
We had good times in our public schooling, but we also had some things going on in our public schooling that made us not necessarily want to subject our children to those things.
Right.
I've had in my time in high school, I had some examples where I was bullied or intimidated, and it was really not pleasant and very difficult to go into the school building, go into the classes where these people were at. It was something that I learned to overcome, but I didn't necessarily want to subject my children to having to put up with that. I had a sister. I have a sister still, and she experienced a lot of self-esteem and insecurity issues, and schooling did not help her at all in that. Public schooling was not great for that in her life. She also had to overcome, and by the power of the Lord, we did overcome. It was great. But I wasn't wanting any of my children to actually be put in positions where they felt like they weren't enough, or they didn't have what it took, or just anything that would affect their self-esteem in a negative way. When you're young, children are just cruel. I don't know why, but they just are. I guess because everyone's born in sin and they have to be redeemed from that sin. But children can be very cruel to other children.
I had nicknames growing up. Some were fun and they were fine. Others were, some of my classmates would use the nickname in a nice way. Some would not. And that's put in a polite.
Yes,
and
politely.
Nice.
Yes.
And so experienced some of that. I also had some of the self-doubt and self-esteem issues, and no one really to help with that process.
Right.
Through the school system. And there was some counselors in school. I remember there's one particular counselor that we had in high school was a really good guy, and he was helpful in a lot of ways. The students loved him because he cared about the kids. So there was some good. It was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
It was a mixed bag of good and bad. Our notes.
I had some experiences with teachers who were really less than they should have been. I'm not knocking on all teachers, because there are teachers out there who have their whole heart and soul in everything they're doing, trying to do their very best. But there are some that they just weren't that interested. I don't know if they were just at the end of their teaching and they were done with kids, or I don't know what the problem was, but they just weren't great. And my mom had to intervene several times with a couple of them, because they just were not teaching well, and they were not helping me, and they weren't living up to what they really should be doing.
Yeah. I mean, I had a couple teachers in high school that just personality-wise we didn't click.
No.
And so they just didn't like me. For no other reason than personality,
which makes it hard to learn.
It does.
You're there for schooling, for learning, and if you're not jiving with that teacher, very difficult.
Like, I was a student athlete because I played sports, so I was always busy doing sports. And I had one particular teacher that she did not like student athletes. She thought all athletes were stupid, and she thought all athletes got special privileges, which wasn't true. Some may have, most of us did not. And so she made life hard in her classroom. And there were several classes that she taught that I had to take. And so those were really difficult to do, and she actually downgraded me in some things just because I was a student athlete.
Right. I think that
it was what it was.
yeah, right. Now, somebody's going to say, okay, but you had to learn and overcome. It was good for you because you learned to overcome all these different obstacles. Okay, yes, maybe. But I think it left some scars that also
Right.
had to be worked over and healed. And
Right.
it was not all a great learning experience.
Right.
Some of it was damaging. And so I wasn't really wanting to put my children through that.
Yeah.
I was interested in my children learning the lessons of life, but I wanted to be able to guard them from the things that weren't just lessons; they were assaults against them.
And there's a difference.
And there's a difference, yeah.
You can still go through difficult challenges. You still may have a self-esteem issue. You may still have self-doubts. You may still have some things,
Mm-hmm.
but in the safety of homeschooling,
Mm-hmm.
you can deal with that with the people who
Work on
care
it.
about you the
Yes.
most.
Yes. Yes, you can build up and encourage and do the things that the Lord, the Bible, tells us to train our children in and
Yeah.
help them in. And I knew that the advice that we would give them and the training and teaching that we would give them would be based in
Mm-hmm.
the Bible. It would be based in what the Lord says. And so that was very important to us.
Yeah.
Because in public schooling, you're not going to get that unless you just have a wonderful teacher who steps in and goes against all odds and talks about the Lord. That's just not going to happen.
Which is very unlikely.
It's very
It
unlikely.
can happen, and it does in certain places.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in the South, in really small school districts,
Right. Yeah.
potentially, but not so much in a school of a quote unquote normal sized town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
10, 15, 20,000 or more.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not going to happen because, and I was going to talk about this, so I'll just jump in right now with this. One of the things we looked at was
Mm-hmm.
the potential quality of the education our children
Right.
would receive.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked at public schooling, and even though we both went through that, even by
Right.
the time we got married,
Mm-hmm.
it was flawed when we went through,
Yes.
but it was extremely flawed
By the time we
by
got
the time
children.
we got married.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it now, it's not flawed. It's bad.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the statistics and the numbers of what children are learning in school
Mm-hmm.
and compare it to, because people love to do this with education, compare it with education around the world,
Yeah.
we are way below, way below in our nation, other nations.
Right.
They're teaching their children stuff in 7th and 8th grade that you're not even seeing in college in some cases here in America, and so we knew
Well,
that
despite of all the programs that have come along,
right,
they have dumbed down
yes,
education. And so we wanted our children actually to receive a quality
yes,
education as well as being quality discipled
yeah,
in what we believe.
yeah, and so because of the flawed system, and I condemn the system because, like Leslie said, there are teachers within that system that are phenomenal.
Yeah.
But they're caught in a flawed system.
Right.
And so if you're working in a place
Mm-hmm.
that's going bankrupt, you could be the best employee there was,
Mm-hmm.
but when the company goes bankrupt, you got nowhere to go. You're just, I mean, unless you find a job before they go under.
Yeah.
And right now, teachers are hard to come by. Good teachers are hard to come by. And a lot of teachers who have been teaching for years are now leaving education
Right.
because of the
Mandates on what
the
they have
mandates,
to
the
teach.
indoctrination that they have to
Mhm.
do. They quit teaching the basics and they
Yeah.
started teaching social engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, and that they weren't even doing that yet when we
Right.
began to homeschool. They
Right.
were doing it maybe on a very
Limited.
modest level, a limited level.
Yeah.
But now, if you pay any attention at all, you know that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with why we chose homeschooling,
No.
except for the quality of the education.
Right. Exactly.
And we'll get back on that later.
In 1995, when we were starting homeschooling, there was definitely opposing thought patterns on what should be taught, what could be taught, what they should, how they should lead children and all that, and it was mostly against what we believed, and so it definitely influenced us in pushing us towards homeschooling. We just wanted more control than that.
Yeah.
There are studies upon studies upon studies about the good that it does for children to stay with their mother much longer than preschool and kindergarten age even. It's good for children to be with their parents, with the parents who birthed them, who love them, who are concerned about them. Good for them, really good for them to stay with parents much longer than what the school system wants to start them so early and take them away from their home situation. And so that's one of my big things, that I wanted them to be home where they need to be,
Right.
to learn and feel secure and grow and get that good foundation. Then also, we just wanted our influence and our beliefs to be totally instilled in our children.
Yeah.
I think most people want that. No matter what they believe, they want their children to have their belief system. And the best way to get that instilled in them was to have them at home with us so that we could train them and teach them.
And you might be saying, well, I'm sending my kid to a private Christian school.
Okay.
That's great. That's good. But homeschooling still gives you way more ability to instill and disciple and indoctrinate your child into the belief system that you want them to have throughout their life.
Right.
And if you don't think that's important, you need to look at numbers. For example, just 20 years ago, I think it was 6% or 8%, the numbers aren't accurate in my head, that students that were in junior high and high school identified with homosexuality. Right now, in that same age bracket, it's 25%. How do you think that grew? I'm just leaving that alone a minute. How do you think that grew? Well, it grew because that was being taught inside the school system. It may not be being taught inside a private Christian school system, but even there, you may not have everyone with the same belief system that you have, and teaching what you believe to your children.
Not to mention, your children are interacting with children who may not believe how you believe, and they're being influenced before they're ready to be influenced.
Yeah, they're not prepared yet.
Exactly.
To defend their faith.
Right.
And so part of the foundation that Leslie was talking about is a preparation time. It's preparation time to get them to the place that they believe what they believe. One, because we instilled it and installed it. Two, because they've done their own research, their own study. Because we really wanted them, as they grew, we really instilled in them the ability to study, look, learn. And our kids don't necessarily every cross T and dotted I that we do may not be exactly the same that they do as they're adults now, but their basic foundational faith is laid for life and for eternity, and we can thank homeschooling for that. We really can. So we really wanted to generate a foundation of faith, generate a foundation of discipleship and learning, and we incorporated all of that in our schooling, because we had Bible, we had math, we had science, we had everything that you would normally get, but we added our faith as an integral part of our homeschooling. So that's some of the reason that we really chose homeschooling, so we could do those things.
Yeah, we wanted to be able to be with our children.
Yeah.
Brian always says that he, being the principal and being out of the house more than the teacher who was with them all the time, he always says that they always talk to you. They're always telling you things. And I said, that's because we are like together all the time. I mean, we're in the house together. We're in the kitchen together. Everything we did at home, we did it together. And so I'm very close with my children. Yeah. I know what's on their hearts. I know what's, even now, I know where they're at and where they're going, where they're coming from in their beliefs or their thought patterns. And if I don't know, I have opportunity to ask them and interact with them and find out, because we're very comfortable being together. Now, it's not to say that Brian never knew anything about these kids.
Not one thing.
but
Ever.
Being at home together meant that we were very tight knit. We were very close, and we still are very close. Even as our children are all adults now, they are very close with one another.
Yep.
They still reminisce about the really good times that they had. We have social children, in case anybody's wondering. We have very social children. There's only maybe one who is a little more laid back, not so social, but she enjoys some social things too. But our children are really social.
She's selectively social.
Yeah, she's selectively social. That's a good way to put it. But homeschooling did not hurt their social life at all. But that was because part of our life, excuse you, bless you.
Pardon me.
Part of their life was to go to church. We made church our social activity.
Yep.
And our place where they interacted with friends. We felt safe about that because those people were more on our page of how we were thinking and believing, and we still monitored and watched who was interacting with who, but that was their social time. They learned to be social with people of all ages, from young toddlers and babies all the way up through the oldest people in the church, and they were able to interact in a way at each level that was a blessing to people. And so I think that was really a great part of their growing up too. They didn't lack their social skills because they were running around with kids. We had some homeschool groups that they played with children and all that, but our goal was never to make them better children. Our goal was to make them adults.
That was going to be my next point.
Okay.
You know, all along, pardon me for the nose thing, and the sneezing on the video and on the podcast. I have said all along, Leslie and I didn't do baby talk with our children. And people are like, what's your problem? Like, I don't have to teach them how to do baby talk. They will do that all on their own. They will be cute and mess things up all by themselves.
All by themselves.
And they did. We took our, like I said, we're serious people. So we took our job seriously. So our job is not to raise children, but to raise God-fearing, functional adults.
Right. Now, they had to be good children in
the process.
Yeah.
They did. I mean,
but the goal was to take them up to adulthood. So
I didn't take them at 2 and expect them to go out and mow the lawn.
No.
I didn't take them at 5 and expect them to do the books and the checkbook. We just didn't do that. That'd have been stupid. So everything we did was age appropriate, but was always with the long-term goal in mind that what we're raising here is not children.
Yeah.
What we're raising here are future adults. Future God-fearing, kingdom-building, functional adults that can live, that can earn income, that can be a blessing to the people, that will build God's kingdom, that will understand their calling, their purpose, and the destiny that's set on their life. And so with that, that's also, you don't get that anywhere else besides homeschooling.
No.
You just don't. And so we did all that so that they would be that.
Yeah.
And now, on the backside of all that, you know, over 26 years later, we look back and we could see that we made the right decision.
Yeah.
It was a quality decision.
It was.
Given to us as a mandate by God, and we stuck to it. And was it always easy? No. Was it challenging? Yeah. We had to learn how to teach. We had to learn how to do different curriculums. And really, Leslie did more of that than I did. She would do all the research, and we would sit down and go over it together, decide what was the best for each child. Because that's another cool thing in homeschooling is each child can have a customized educational experience.
Yes. We're going to get there next time.
Okay. I'm getting ahead of the script. I apologize.
That was just a teaser. Now you can listen to the next one and see what else we're going to talk about.
All right. So anything else about why we chose homeschooling, babe?
No, I think that covers it. We loved our homeschooling experience.
Yeah, we did.
And it was definitely worth all that we did to make it happen.
Yep.
Definitely worth it.
All right. Well, with that said, we're going to wrap this thing up because I got like 60 seconds. So thank you for watching and listening to the Unbreakable podcast. Shameless plug for those of you that don't know, my wife wrote a book. It's called The Family Manual, a practical guide to raising a Christian family. You can hear some that come through as their thoughts, even while we're talking about the homeschooling effort. Go to theunbreakablefamily.com, go to the store and buy the book and use it. It's got good content for every age that your child may be, from the time they're born to the time that they get married. So I think it's a generational heirloom book that you should have in your home to hand down and use to help you get through every stage of life with your children. I'm prejudiced about that because my wife wrote it, but it's still true. So that's the shameless plug for this week. And with that, we love you. We're praying for you weekly, and not WEAKLY, but WEEKLY.
Every week.
Every week. We are praying for you and believing God's best for you and for your family. So with that said, we love you, and we'll talk to you next week here on the Unbreakable podcast. Bye for now.